Hello, a very warm welcome to you all to the last of our four-part webinar journey, which is sought to provide a basic introduction to some key concepts regarding the world of microbiological contamination. I am David Armitage, and I have the pleasure to present to you today. Within the next 20 minutes, we will seek to provide a look into the advantages of catching contamination early, how the removal of water helps minimize the risk, that rapid testing provides a basis for the most effective remediation to be undertaken, and how a flexible and fluid testing program can help identify the best times to do maintenance. It is important to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, although of course we would love to provide you with one. So we are not intending to be preaching or prescribing remedies during this session, just providing some pointers on what to look for and some of the techniques which can be used to help reduce cost and minimize the risks microbiological contamination can pose. We have stressed all along that water is the main contributing factor to microbiological contamination. So periodically removing as much as possible by any means will help to maintain and minimize the risks that it may pose later. Because water, the organisms that cause microbiological contamination, and potential other contaminants such as particulates are usually found at the bottom of fuel system tanks, then ideally future fuel systems would be of a conical, bottom-fed fuel delivery design with built-in fuel filtration or fuel polishing systems to help reduce water and particulate settlement by agitating the fuel and helping to keep it as clean as possible. The less water and contaminants which are given the opportunity to breed or impact fuel systems, the less maintenance will be necessary to remedy them, but will also aid greater optimization of assets. After all, prevention really is better than cure. However, whilst the removal of water might be the most important method of slowing the growth of any microbiological contamination, testing and the preparation of a sample to be tested for it cannot be understated. The need for speed in relation to fuel samples to be tested for microbiological growth is because organisms can change rapidly. So, to get the most representative result you can, testing as soon as possible and ideally on site at the tank is hugely important. The main reason is the longer it takes for the sample to be tested, the more likely the organisms could change by either multiplying or, the worst case scenario, dying. Whilst having a higher test result may not be the end of the world, as it will likely lead to some sort of treatment, what if the organisms perish and you end up getting a false negative result? You would be in the belief that everything is okay, so no action would be taken when there could be a problem just around the corner. It is important to re-emphasize that not all organisms are harmful to fuel. So why would you want to act upon something that could have entered the fuel system through environmental or human factors? There are many stray organisms that can enter a sample for a whole host of reasons, such as someone accidentally sneezing into the sample, or a sample left exposed to the elements before being sealed. So minimizing the risk of cross-contamination will help any test process perform the job it was intended to do. Testing is the most cost-effective first line of defense, so giving it the best chance to give you the most accurate representation of what is really happening in your fuel system can save you a lot of time, effort, and indeed money. When taking a sample, remember the acronym Pest. Preparation is key to obtaining a good and most representative fuel sample. Environment. Minimize external factors that could pose a cross-contamination risk. Sample. As a minimum, take a sample from the lowest point of the tank, as that is where the highest concentration of water and organisms are likely to be found. And transport. ASTM D6469 recommends that if not testing samples quickly and on site, then they should be transported on ice and tested within 24 hours for the most representative result. Whilst the acronym may be easy, how do we put all this into practice? When taking a sample, it is important that the sample is taken from the lowest point of the tank, and that is where it is likely the water is likely to settle and organisms will be laying on their lilos, drinking their cocktails. Sample equipment would be cleaned thoroughly. If transported off-site, the sample should be done so on ice to minimize the chance of organisms multiplying or even degrading. Ideally, test any water phase of any sample, as that will have the highest concentration of organisms present. And test as quickly as possible. The earlier you catch microbiological contamination, the more cost-effective it will be for your operation. It is plausible that historically, parties may have just repeatedly changed filters, and perhaps even over time, increasing their micron levels to reduce the number of filter changes. Or frequently added biocide as a preemptive remedy against potential risks, or indeed just periodically tank cleaned all assets. There is no right or wrong answer, but finding the most efficient and effective combination of tools will not only help reduce costs, but also help provide greater asset optimization, reduce potential downtime and return to service protocols, potentially provide greater fuel efficiency, and in a world striving to be greener, reduce emissions. Testing can help to reduce the overall cost of maintaining assets in the fight against microbiological contamination by providing a guide as to when and what level of intervention may be necessary. Over the previous few slides, we have indicated the need to ensure the most representative sample possible by minimizing cross-contamination and testing as quickly as you can. That not all organisms are harmful and will degrade the fuel, so why act upon them? And how testing can help reduce maintenance costs. But all this is great, but wouldn't it also be nice to have a system which utilizes antibody technology like that used in the medical industry for such things as rapid COVID testing, and for it to be conducted on site in minutes, not days, which also, through a free smartphone app, provides a fully traceable, data-driven reporting tool that can aid operations to track trends within their assets, providing them the ability to intervene quickly to situations before they become bigger issues. Whilst there is no simple right or wrong answer, or indeed mandates on testing frequencies, there are a few additional areas to consider to help you find the right fit for your operation. Humid and wet climates can help fuel the growth of microbiological contamination, as water can enter the system through environmental factors such as condensation. And testing does not have to be a regimented practice. Actually, it can be quite flexible to help meet any growing concerns you may have about specific assets or locations. But a minimum testing pattern of twice a year is often advised. As organisms are not spread evenly in any fuel system, if you get a positive result in the first instance, it is recommended to retest to confirm the result and to minimize the risk of acting upon the potential hotspot. If the result is confirmed and any remedial work undertaken, it is advised to test again once complete to ensure the intervention that has been taken has worked. As testing can be completely flexible, if you happen to have had a microbiological incident, which has now been rectified, it may be of interest to the operation to bring the next testing cycle forward from, say, 6 months to 3 months, for example, to be able to monitor that asset more closely for any signs of further issues before pushing it back again, once you are comfortable that the previous risk has been minimized. Testing is one thing, but what options are there if you get a positive result? And something really does need doing. Before proceeding, it is worth indicating that microbiological contamination can have significant implications on unplanned maintenance costs and potential disruption to operations. Ask yourself, what is the cost of having to potentially downgrade fuel, remove it altogether, dispose of it, and replace with fresh? If I must take an asset out of service, what is the knock-on effect? Is it even feasible to take the asset out of service in the first place? And can I utilize in-house resources, or are third-party contractors required? And if so, how quickly can they be mobilized? And at what cost? Not monitoring microbiological contamination can have serious impacts on safety of life equipment and potential environmental impacts from possible corrosion of storage tanks. So can you really take the risk? So you've carried out a test which gave a positive result, and a second test has confirmed it. But what can be done now? There are a number of options, with the most mainstream currently on screen. And let us start with the least intrusive from an operational perspective: bore scoping or tank inspection. Having highlighted that not all organisms will degrade fuel, why would you want to act upon a result that may have been influenced by outside sources, such as whether an operative may not have washed their hands, or that the sample was left unsealed and exposed to the environment? Having a look inside the tank for signs of contamination would be a logical and fairly cost-effective place to start, potentially saving money in remedial action or downtime. Looking into the tank will help identify the extent of the problem. If the extent of the problem is not significant, then it could be possible to fuel polish or filter the fuel to take out excess contaminants. In some industries, a kill dose of biocide can be used to help kill any microbes present, but also help break down contamination which may have adhered itself to fuel system components. The reality is that a combination of both biocide and fuel filtering or polishing would be required, as it is all well and good killing off the organisms, but if the debris is still left in the tank, then further issues can occur. So filtering this out will also help. It is important to highlight two things with the potential use of biocide. Firstly, when using biocide, the fuel level in the tank at the time of the treatment is something to consider. What if contamination has spread up the walls and is above the fuel line when administered? The treatment will not be able to work its full magic. So as soon as you fill the tank up again, the problem will start again. Secondly, regularly using the same biocide can create an environment where the organisms may become immune to it as they evolve to the environment in a similar way to the differing strains of COVID have been doing. So changing it up every now and then, or reducing its usage frequency, is not necessarily a bad thing. Finally, in the worst cases, you may not be able to avoid tank cleaning, including the potential additional cost of disposing of the fuel within the tank. Tank cleaning also results in the need to put assets out of service for a period of time. And this can have knock-on effects operationally. So you want to avoid any unplanned tank cleaning as much as possible. As prevention is better than cure, reducing the chance of contamination becoming an issue in the first place is highly beneficial and the best course of action. But remember, microbiological contamination can occur naturally through no fault of any party and can be transferred from one asset to another as the fuel moves through the supply chain. As water is a key component in the development of microbiological contamination, removing as much of it from the system as possible is vital. And in some assets, this can be done through pre-installed drain points or water separation filters. Alternatively, other means may be necessary, but the most effective way is to keep the fuel circulating to reduce the risk of it settling in the first place. This is where fuel polishing systems can help to both filter out certain contaminants and reduce water settlement by agitating the fuel and keeping it circulated. This can be undertaken by permanently attaching equipment to the tanks themselves, or additional equipment ranging from a small trolley-based system to fuel trucks designed specifically for that purpose. In some industries, it is also possible to add certain stabilizers or additives to the fuel, which may help minimize the risk. But irrespective of all these options, there will still need to be an element of testing to be undertaken to provide confirmation and traceability of asset health, and for results to be fed into any asset monitoring systems you may have, so maintenance can be planned accordingly. Finally, future-proofing fuel systems could focus on conical shape, bottom-fed fuel delivery to reduce the presence of water and particulate on a more consistent basis. Earlier, we indicated that in an ideal world, there would be a test that could be performed on site, helping to reduce the need for transporting samples to off-site locations, where testing times cannot be guaranteed. That would also be simple, providing results within minutes, while seeking to focus only on certain organisms that are known to degrade fuel and not detect all organisms. One that would also have a data-driven functionality to help with instant reporting, to aid trend analysis and swifter remedial action when required. As we've already highlighted, there really is no one-shoe-fits-all approach, as not only are there no legislative mandates for the testing and treatment of fuel, but also industry protocols differ as well. For instance, large parts of the aviation fuel supply chain cannot use biocide. So the basis upon which any organization builds a prevention process rests on each operation's individual conditions. However, any process should consider the pest elements of preparation, environment, sample, and transport to ensure that the sample is the best that it can be, helping to maximize the chances of obtaining the most representative result from any testing process. Speed of testing is vital, but the most important factor is the removal of as much water as possible from the fuel system to minimize both the risk of microbiological contamination and indeed the cost of fixing a problem. The establishment of a repeatable program for the monitoring and prevention of contamination will help your operation save money and reduce downtime of assets by minimizing unplanned maintenance caused by the damage that these pests can create when left undetected. To summarize, the presence of water should be minimized as much as possible. The preparation of fuel sample and testing it quickly is key in providing the best foundation for any test process to do its job effectively. Good fuel husbandry will save you money by reducing unplanned maintenance costs. Testing at the earliest stage is the most cost-effective first line of defense in the fight against microbiological contamination. And analyzing trends enables swifter action and asset control. We hope you have enjoyed this journey and found it helpful in understanding the principles of microbiological contamination and potentially what can be done to protect your assets. Thank you for your time today, and we hope you have a pleasant remainder of the day. Thank you very much for joining us.